My guest tonight has a fantastic track record in the field of wildlife photography, both still and moving image. She's won all sorts of awards and been lucky enough to get up close and personal with that rarest of species, David Attenborough. Hello, Sue Flood FRPS.
Hello, good evening.
Now, you're speaking from North Wales. You're very much a Welsh girl, aren't you?
I am, yeah, living here in Malden, North Wales, and was born in St Asaph, so lovely to be back in close to my roots.
Well, let's go back to your roots and see an image of you using a camera for the very first time.
Yeah.
How old are you here?
I was about 2 here. This was my grandfather's camera, and this was actually, my Canon camera.
I think you're trying to work out the controls, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so.
So photographically, who were the influences in your life?
Well, when I was growing up, there were a number of people, but particularly my dad. My father Howard here, he used to be in the Merchant Navy. So when I was growing up, I would hear all these tales from him of his adventures in the Merchant Navy and traveling the world with the Blue Funnel Line. And, you know, just all these incredible stories from places like Japan and China and Burma and so on. And then the other person, of course, was David Attenborough. And watching David Attenborough's documentaries as a kid, like I'm sure many of the people watching tonight, and indeed growing up with them ever since. And watching his documentaries and also Michael Palin's travel series, it was fantastic as a child to open up a world that I never dreamt I'd get to see.
So that's how the seeds were sown. How did you get from dreaming about this to working, in this case for the survival program with Anglia Television? How do you make that jump?
Well, I remember saying at school to one of my teachers when I was about 15 and was asked what would I like to do when I left school. I said I'd like to work making wildlife films with David Attenborough, and was told no one gets to do that. How about domestic science? And it was, yes, about 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to go back to my old school, the Queen's School Chester, and give a talk at their prize giving in the Chester Cathedral, and actually tell that story. So it was nice to eventually get to do that. I studied zoology at university. I started writing to the BBC, to the Natural History Unit, and saying I wanted to make wildlife films with David. Of course, I get lots of letters like that, or emails nowadays, but this was the days of snail mail, and I was very fortunate to have a couple of people encourage me, a fantastic guy called Mike Salisbury, who was the series producer on Life of Birds and Private Life of Plants, and also Alistair Fothergill, who was working on, at the time, Trials of Life, and who went on to be series producer on Blue Planet, Frozen Planet, Planet Earth, and so on, and more recently Our Planet. So they were very encouraging to me in sort of encouraging me to stick at it. So I did my zoology degree, and after 7 years after writing my first letter to the Natural History Unit, I finally got in there.
Fantastic place to work in Bristol, of course.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at another one of your images. Here you are. Is it the North Pole?
Yeah, that's me at the North Pole. So I'm very fortunate to have a job that takes me, it's literally taken me from the North Pole at 90 degrees north down to the South Pole and in between. This was when I was working on a Russian icebreaker in the, obviously in the Arctic, going from Murmansk, and I went to talk about Arctic wildlife and photography and so on shortly after I left the BBC. More of that later.
And how long were these trips during your career? You've been on some pretty long trips, haven't you?
Yeah, here I am at the South Pole looking particularly glamorous.
How many layers of clothing have you got on there?
I had about 5 layers on. That was actually a pretty balmy day. It was minus 23 that day, I remember. The day before it had been minus 48. But you can see here I'm really well wrapped up, nice balaclava, several layers of thermals, although warm enough to open up my jacket. So
you love it on the ice, don't you?
I absolutely love the polar regions. I love working in the polar regions. Yeah, nowhere
However, just to show you don't spend all your time freezing to death, you also go to hot places like Papua New
Yes,
Guinea.
exactly. Where my hair is clearly not as impressive as the headdresses of my companions there. So yeah, this was working in Papua New Guinea for a few weeks a few years ago. But yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate to have a job that has taken me to all 7 continents, and to have been, you know, inspired by David Attenborough and then end up working with him was obviously a dream come true. It really was. And yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to him for that inspiration.
What is he actually like to be with, David?
It's funny. People often ask, you know, is he as nice as he seems in real life? To which the answer I always give is no, he isn't, because he's actually much nicer. He's just an absolutely incredible person, as is Michael Palin. I mean, they're just both lovely, genuine, inspiring people who are interested in the world around them and in other people, and you know, it's very much a team effort. And yes, so yeah, David is an absolute inspiration to millions of people.
Now, you filmed a lot of rare behaviors in your time, including killer whales hunting grey whales. So let's see our first video clip from Blue Planet.
Yeah, that's an amazing sequence that was filmed by Doug Allen and Tom Fitz when we were in Monterey in California, and I was photographing stills for the series, and it was just the most extraordinary thing to witness, and it makes the hair stand up on my neck now. No one had filmed this before, and we were extremely fortunate to get to see that very, very rare behaviour and film a sequence of it for the first time. And yeah, it was so exciting. And of course you have very mixed feelings, because you're seeing this extraordinary behaviour, which as a zoologist, you know, is amazing to get to see this behaviour up close, to see these killer whales hunting, orcas hunting, and that cooperative hunting is extremely impressive. So as a biologist, it's very impressive. As a wildlife filmmaker, my God, how exciting to be able to film something no one's ever filmed before. Of course, as a person, as a human being, it's very heart-wrenching to see this baby whale, to see this whale calf being killed, but then of course the killer whales have to eat as well. So it's lots of mixed emotions, but yeah, that's still one of the most exciting sequences I've ever been involved with. And you know, Doug and Tom did the most brilliant job with that. But I can tell you, one of the very quickest ways to get seasick is filming underwater stuff on a pole cam, because I was sat there with my head under a blanket watching the screen. So Doug is operating the camera and I'm watching the screen and going, you know, left a bit, right a bit. And of course you're watching something on the screen and your ears are telling you something different to your eyes, and you're in choppy water. So it's a very good way to get seasick.
But you also got the first ever footage of polar bears hunting beluga whales. How did you do that?
That was amazing. Doug and I went up to the Canadian high Arctic. So with all of these big series, you know, like Blue Planet, Planet Earth, Frozen Planet, or whatever, you're trying to keep your ears out to make sure you're hearing about different stories. And a friend in the Arctic, he phoned me late one night and said, "Hey, I've just heard about this situation." And a hunter friend of his brother-in-law, had been out looking for seals and had come across a situation where some polar bears were standing around a hole in the ice, a thing called a savsat. That's a hole in the ice being kept open by the movement of animals. And to give you an idea of how unusual this was, the Inuit in the local community, which was hours from anywhere else, they had not seen this since 1967. And so I was on I remember distinctly, I was on a first aid course in the BBC on a Friday afternoon and got pulled out of that course and told I was going to the Canadian Arctic the next day. So I was up packing till the wee small hours and then off. So it was, yeah, very exciting. And again, just that extreme privilege of being able to go and witness amazingly unusual behaviour. So there was myself, Doug, the cameraman, Doug Allen, and 2 Inuit guides, and we arrived on location about 11 o'clock at night, but at that time of year it's 24-hour daylight, and the first polar bear turned up about 20 minutes after we did, and we were then filming almost for 36 hours straight. So yeah, pretty exhausting.
So all it takes is a phone call from the Arctic. I like it. Why don't we have a look now then at some of that unique footage?
Sure.
He really has fantastic delivery, doesn't he, David Attenborough? But here's the aftermath of a successful attack. It's pretty gruesome, isn't it?
Oh, it was amazing. It really was. And you know, we did get some lovely footage there. Doug got some fantastic topside, and then we were filming underwater with the pole cam, and the idea was we were going to both dive in that subset, but when we got there we realized that it was the whales were understandably very stressed. They were going to be stuck in there until the ice broke up, and so we decided we'd film with the pole cam. So we dropped that camera into the water and did it from the surface. But you know, the bear was extremely persistent and just kept going and going and going, trying to catch a whale. And of course, as it got warmer, the ice was melting out a bit and the hole was getting bigger and it was getting increasingly difficult. And then at one point, the bear just gave up and started approaching us. And I remember it getting closer and we were trying to basically frighten it away. And it just kept coming closer and closer, so close in fact that in the end we, when it ignored the sound of gunshot and was trying to shoot it, we ended up using pepper spray. So luckily there was a little bit of a breeze drifting in the direction of the bear. But I remember Doug saying, "Don't let it know you're scared," which when you're standing there faced by the world's largest land carnivore about 30 feet away. I always say that's where the grey hair came from.
The pepper spray on a bear, that is unusual. Now, you seem to spend a great deal of time underwater. Do you actually like it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I started diving in 1984 when I was at Durham, so that's where I went to university, and oh, it's just the most fantastic feeling being underwater. And so I qualified. I was also able to go off and work on something called Operation Rally, as it was then, or Rally International as it is now, and go and work on the Barrier Reef straight after I graduated. So it was that experience when I qualified as an advanced diver and so on that helped me get the job eventually when I got into the BBC on the Blue Planet.
But of course, being underwater is one thing, being underwater filming is another, particularly when you're wearing enormous mitts. Now, if we have a look at this next image, how on earth can you operate a camera wearing mitts like that?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. Well, one of the things you do before you get in the water, I mean, you can see here I'm wearing a dry suit and wet mitts. So in other words, there's a seal around the wrist, but they will let in water, as my hood will. So before we got in the water, you would boil up a kettle or take a flask of hot water and pour very, very hot water into your gloves so that it was as hot as you could possibly stand before you got in the water. So that would help you stay a little more mobile and you know, maybe stay in for about 40-50 minutes, something like that. But yeah, I mean, when you're in there and something exciting has happened, as I am here with this beluga whale, and this particular whale, she came up to me, I will never forget it. I was in the water with her 4 different times, and she came up and she was putting her rostrum, her nose, if you like, against my cheek and vocalizing. And it was, God, what a fantastic experience. And so you kind of forget all the cold when there's something exciting like that going on.
Incredible. Well, now the next sequence of shots is interesting. Filming Blue Planet, camping on ice. Doug Allen proposing to you, and then nearly dying. Now, where is this?
This is one of my favourite places on the planet. This is at Lancaster Sound in the Canadian High Arctic, and Doug, who is a brilliant cameraman, has made a number of films up there, and he and I have worked up there a number of times. So this is in the middle of June. It's the most brilliant time to go up there because you've got the 24-hour daylight that's fueling a plankton bloom, and that plankton bloom is of course providing food for fish and whales and birds, and you know, this whole fantastic ecosystem. And so here, this is on what's called the flow edge, the edge of the ice. So we are camping on the sea ice, which as you can see is breaking up. It's a pretty crummy time of year to be camping, as you can see from these big pools of water lying on the ice. So of course the 24-hour sunlight is melting that snow, which will eventually drain away through cracks in the ice. And we camped about 1 mile back from the edge of the ice. We were out filming bowhead whales, and the next morning at about 6:30 I was woken by our friend Alayak, our Inuk guide, saying open water, and I came out of the tent and saw these tracks going off into the water. So my first thought was, oh my God, that's so lucky, it's broken just in front of us after being camped all the way back, a mile back. Wow, what a relief. And then I turned and looked around and realized we were on this really small piece of ice. And I remember feeling incredibly sick. There was just myself, Doug, Alayak. We had it had luckily broken around our tent. We can see in the next photo that we've got all our stuff piled onto, we piled our stuff onto the Comatic, onto the sledge. You can see this little blue boat here. So you might think, oh, hooray, they got something to get into, they were going to be fine. But when we actually turned that boat over off the sledge, there was this hole punched through the bottom of it, where when we'd gone over some rough ice, it had come up between the runners of the sledge and punched a hole through the bottom. So that was as much use as a chocolate fire guard. So here we've got Doug on the radio, and then eventually we got the helicopter coming in from a few hours away, a place called Polar Shelf. Luckily, this was the one day that we happened to have lined up to do aerials. We were going to do some aerials for the Blue Planet, and yeah, long story short, but we were extremely fortunate to get off there. And while we were on there, Doug actually turned around and said, will you marry me? I think possibly thinking he was going to die. But yes, when we actually took off from that helicopter, that was the view, and you realized just how very, very lucky we were to get off that piece of ice. And the next shot, even more so, you know, that's what we were stuck on. And yeah, I don't really want to have a closer shave than that.
No, that really was a close call, wasn't it? Well, now we have another exciting shoot. You said once it was one of your most exciting ever, actually. 10 weeks of filming. It ended up as a clip lasting less than 3 minutes in Planet Earth, and also a clip in the Disney movie Earth. So let's have a look.
Yeah, this was an amazing experience, and I think you know, my late mum used to say, "How come you're so patient with animals and not with people?" And as you say, 10 weeks for a sequence that ended up as 2 minutes and 57 seconds, and it gives you an idea of how long you have to sort of really stick at it. And I think that's, with these big series, again, sometimes you have the opportunity to spend extended periods of time in the field, which is obviously a great luxury, if not in terms of living conditions, in terms of the time allowed to make the film.
But I mean, you got some marvelous images, of course, but not many organizations could do this, could they?
No, and no, and at the time, Blue Planet was the biggest ever budget for the BBC's natural history series, and here we have Doug sort of in the water with the whale, with the humpback, and I'm of course in the water as well, taking the stills, and I love this shot because he's a very good breath hold diver, and he was able to hold his breath for almost 3 minutes, and it's extraordinary that nearly all of the sequence as it ended up in Planet Earth and the Earth movie was filmed on practically one breath of air, save a couple of cutaways. So yeah, it was pretty remarkable. But to be in the water with a 15-meter, 45-foot long adult whale and the calf, and they would allow you to be literally within a few feet, as you'll see in the next photo, you know, literally right next to them. This isn't cropped. And when I took this photo, I was as close to that whale as I am to my computer screen now, literally close enough to touch. And at one point, there was a very strong current pushing me towards the whale, and I had to put my arm out gently, put my hand on her side, and she just turned this eye and looked at me, and I just gently finned away. And I was in the water with her for about 2.5 hours. So, you know, what an absolutely incredible experience. And I remember actually when I got the job on the Blue Planet, Alistair Fothergill told me I got the job, and I said, that is better than winning the lottery. And that goes for working on Planet Earth too. I mean, if I had the choice between winning the lottery or working on those programs, there's no competition. It was just, yeah, experience of a lifetime.
Well, here's another different sort of experience of a lifetime. Let's have a look at this video clip. You call that your divorce clip. So how long did your marriage to Doug last after he abandoned you for the camera?
Amazingly, a few more years. So yeah, I think I have forgiven Doug for that now. And yeah, I mean, as I say, Doug is a fantastic cameraman, and we still actually have our company together, although we're no longer married. But yeah, that's he is a brilliant cameraman, no doubt about it. Perhaps
so you were helping all the time with moving image, of course, but a lot of these camera people were also brilliant still photographers, and you learned from them in that way as well, didn't you?
No, absolutely. I was very fortunate that, you know, being in the field, people like Doug, Kevin Flay, Ian McCarthy, Richard Kirby, Martin Colbert, people who were very good camera people, who were also very good stills photographers, and also people who I'd worked with at Survival as a researcher, who were very inspiring, people like Alan Root and Dieter Plager, Vicky Stone and Mark Diebel, and, you know, people who, yeah, who were very inspiring, and it was having that opportunity to be in the field and learn from them.
And you had some great success, didn't you, getting your images in magazines and that sort of thing, front covers.
Well, yeah, it was very exciting, and it was, yeah, I remember seeing this on the cover of BBC Wildlife for the first time, and standing in Smith's in Bristol, very excited because that was my first ever front cover, and then it ended up on National Geographic Kids magazine as well, so that was actually taken on film, and yeah, it was great to see me getting somewhere, I guess, getting somewhere with my stills.
And of course, eventually you left Natural History Unit with the BBC and went freelance, and almost immediately went to the North Pole on a nuclear-powered Russian icebreaker. Now, what was that about?
Oh yeah, well, I decided to, you know, I was really enjoying, I really enjoyed my time at the BBC. I had 11 years working with David Attenborough on things like Blue Planet, Planet Earth, The Natural World, Wildlife on One, and so on. But I really was enjoying photography more and more, and seeing my images get published. I thought, I wonder, you know, maybe I could make a go of my photography, and I was actually enjoying photography more than being a producer director. So I made the pretty momentous decision to leave after Planet Earth, and I guess end on a high note. And literally the very next day, I was offered the opportunity to go with Quark Expeditions as a lecturer on this ship here. This is the Yamal, the world's biggest nuclear icebreaker, sister ship of 50 Years of Victory, and go to the North Pole and go and talk about polar bears and my experiences with the BBC. And that became a whole new sort of phase of my career where I spent several years working on expedition ships, and I really loved doing that. So traveling to all over the world in a different capacity.
You lucky duck. Well, tell us about this next one. It's an unusual one.
Oh yeah, that was a photograph I took on one of my trips to the North Pole. I've been to the North Pole 7 times now, all by icebreaker, and I took this image and entered it for the International Photography Awards for the climate change section, and was fortunate to win with that. And I just felt that that image of the pole underwater was a sort of symbolic image. And as David Attenborough mentioned the other day in the new Our Planet program off Netflix, you know, the sea ice in the north and in the south is disappearing at a remarkable rate. Yeah, that was an image that was important to me.
Well, once you reach a destination, you're quite keen, aren't you, on observation rather than hopping around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often people can, you know, they can be too engrossed with trying to cover a huge area. Now, some of the time you're spending many days, even weeks, getting to a location. Here, I'm working on an icebreaker. I was on there for 3 months, going to the Weddell Sea, and then on to the Ross Sea. I did a semi-circumnavigation around the Antarctic into the Ross Sea, and then sailed on to New Zealand. So yeah, 3 months living on the icebreaker. So yeah, the journey is obviously a long one, but then when you get to a particular location, I think stopping and looking around you rather than trying to dash and cover too much ground. And this next photograph was just a special moment with these dailies in Cape Adair that in the Ross Sea, just this, it was almost like a diorama, this extraordinary day with, you know, not a cloud in the sky and these spectacular clouds and lovely reflections and so on. So yeah, just getting to look around you, really.
And of course, your penguins are your favourites, aren't they?
I do love penguins, yeah. I do love photographing penguins.
Now, the next one is Ponting's Dark Room, special to you. But for those who don't know, briefly, what is the story behind this?
Oh, I mean, how fortunate. So Ponting, two of my absolute heroes are Ponting and Hurley, so the photographers on Scott and Shackleton's expeditions. And this is Ponting's Dark Room. It's a terrible photograph because I had to sort of flash it, and you couldn't really go in there, but this was in the hut on Ross Island, and you think of the extraordinary images that he produced in extremely difficult conditions, and yeah, what a thrill to visit there.
Astonishing. And of course, one of his famous shots motivated you to take this next one.
Yeah, there's an incredible shot looking through an iceberg at the Terra Nova, and someone pointed out this hole in this iceberg to me, and I thought, God, that would be fantastic if a penguin walked by, and I could see this sort of slightly dirty snow, so you could see that penguins had been walking to and from the colony, and I thought, right, I'm just going to wait and hope, and hopefully eventually one will come along. And yeah, so my patience was rewarded eventually, and I got this shot. And I just wanted to say that, you know, that's how I framed this shot. And with all of these shots, it's something that I take, I suppose, a lot of pride in the fact that I'm trying to frame things as I see them rather than crop it after I've seen them, so trying to get it right in the camera. And certainly that's something I picked up from working with all these camera people, trying to get these shots right.
Get it right in camera. And of course, you fell deeply in love with emperor penguins.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, how could you not? Are they not the most beautiful things? So yeah, I was very fortunate to, as I say, work with Quark Expeditions on, well, many times since 2006, and I was out on the ice at Snow Hill Island, Emperor Penguin Colony, the most northerly colony, and I could see this adult and chick a long, long way away. I mentioned before about basically taking your time and observing and not being in too much of a rush to dash around places. And I could see them, and I'd spent enough time observing penguins to know that they would be, let's say, curious and interested in me. So I lay down on the snow, and you could see them sort of doing this and looking over, and eventually they toddled over, and you can see how low I am. I'm lying right on the snow, and
so they're quite inquisitive, really, aren't they?
Absolutely. So they toddled over, had a look at me, and then walked away. And but yeah, what a lovely,
fabulous. We got one more as well.
I like this just to give you an idea of what they sound like.
Right, here we go. Let's listen. You can't help but like them, can you? Of course, at this stage you started to enter competitions and did rather well. This one won an award, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, I had a great piece of advice from a wonderful photographer called Zena Holloway. Zena is a fantastic underwater photographer, and she said, look, start entering competitions, get your name out there. This was when I was still in the BBC, and my first thought was, oh, well, what's the point? You're not going to win anything. In a very positive way, I have. And she said, no, do it. So I started entering competitions and did start getting some success, and which was lovely. And this was, I was fortunate to pick up a silver medal in the Royal Photographic Society print exhibition for this one. This was taken in Zimbabwe. And the colours here, I mean, it really was like this. It was just extraordinary, these beautiful colours as the sun was setting and the elephants came out of the forest to come and feed at a waterhole in this dust storm. It was
a lovely image. And here's another one which attracted a great deal of attention on Facebook when I posted it. It was a lovely shot of a heron.
Thank you. Well, you know, it's trying to capture, if you like, the personality or the spirit of what you're photographing. And I was watching this heron for ages, and it would go and grab a fish and shake it. And I'd taken a lot of very fast shutter speed, sort of, you know, 2,000, 2,500 per second, where I'd frozen the drops of it. But it just didn't really capture the character of the bird as far as I was concerned. So I just tried something a bit different. And use a slow shutter speed and have this kind of firework effect, and it was far more pleasing a shot for me. And I was fortunate with I've had some luck in competitions with this, so that was nice.
Well, as you say, it captures the character. Although now we go to Costa Rica for the poison dart frog.
Oh yeah.
Was this the first time you used a macro lens?
It was. My dear friend Stephen Johnson had kindly loaned me his macro lens. I'd literally never used a macro lens, so it was a great change from doing the stuff I normally like, which is long lens behaviour, observing things a long way off. I do really like that sort of long lens work, and then suddenly you've got this tiny little thing rather than a big polar bear some distance away. And of course, a very shallow depth of field. And again, that's how I framed it. And yeah, I was fortunate to pick something up in Nature's Best photography competition, and with that, and not that it's all about competitions, but it's obviously lovely when people appreciate your work.
Yeah. Now the next one is interesting, isn't it? Tell us the significance of this.
Oh, I do like this shot. This is, these are crab-eater seals, so the most numerous seal in the Antarctic. And, you know, for me, that shot is made by the person in the yellow jacket. If he wasn't there, then, and it, you know, it's a tricky thing to expose, of course. So good one for checking your histogram. And I was just on a wide angle lens on the back of the ship, on the helicopter deck, and polarizer on, and it just looked fantastic seeing these seals. And I loved the idea of, you know, who's watching who here. So and that was successful in the International Photography Awards as well, so that was nice.
Well, now one of my favorites, Is ice really this colour?
Oh god, yeah. That, I mean, it looks like I've gone crazy in Photoshop. I really haven't. That's what that looked like with the naked eye. It was just the most fantastic day. Took that a couple of years ago, and of course in the Antarctic, and we were in this little zodiac. I was with a group of friends on a private icebreaker trip, and we were cruising in this particular area where you get these enormous bergs. And to give you an idea, if you look on the right hand side of that berg, there's what looks like perhaps a little slug lying on the flat bit of the berg on the right hand side. And that's a seal that's about 8 or 10 foot long. And this beautiful blue colour of the old ice, and this dramatic sky as the sun is trying to get through this sort of cloudy, ominous sky. It was just the most gorgeous day. So I sort of quickly put on my wide angle and took that, and that was for the Earth photo competition at the Royal Geographical Society, and that also ended up on a stamp. So that was yeah, lovely.
Nice image, but your latest work couldn't be more different, could it? We're looking at a garden.
Oh yeah.
So what's behind this?
I've been fortunate to be working on a lovely project with a dear friend about their beautiful garden in Oxfordshire, which eventually will be a book. And this was as the sun, first thing in the morning, in this beautiful wisteria arch, and it was this did well in the International Garden Photographer of the Year award. So it was really nice for me to be recognised for something other than wildlife and travel photography, so for garden photography. And I have to say it's been the loveliest thing to have worked on. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Well, we've seen the dangers in your line of work underwater, but here you are in the next image being walloped on the head by a silverback gorilla in Rwanda. So what happened here?
Oh, that was fantastic. My friend Jane took this photograph. So I'd taken a couple of people on safari, and I was crouched down next to this bamboo, and this beautiful silverback was sitting to the left of me about, I don't know, 10 meters away maybe, just sitting there eating. And then he got up and started walking towards me, and I realised there was no way or I could actually move, and I just said to the guide, am I okay? And he said, yeah, just stay still. So I was just crouched there next to this bamboo, and he came along, and it was quite incredible. He kind of jumped from next, on my left hand side, just jumped over me into this bamboo and was eating the bamboo. And I was looking up at him thinking, oh God, please don't fall, because he'd have crushed me. And then all of a sudden he decided to get out, and he went to step over me and lifted up his foot to step over me, and didn't lift his foot up quite high enough, so caught me on the side of the head. And but oh my God, what an exciting thing to happen. It was fantastic. I think I'm still on the high from that.
How much do they weigh?
Oh God, how much do they weigh? I don't want to give the wrong, I shall have to get back
well,
to it.
If he jumped on you, you'd have felt it even more. We're going to have to whiz on slightly,
Sure.
but let's have a look, because you talked earlier about animal behaviour, and here you are getting very close
Oh
to your
yes.
favourite penguins.
Thank you to my
And
friend
of course
photo.
it was anticipation of animal behaviour that led to your favourite image, the emperor penguin family, which of course is on the front of your book, which you'll see in a moment. And you've even had the honour of images on stamps. How did this come about?
Oh well, someone told me that the British, they were looking for stamps, looking for photos to use for the British Antarctic Territory first day covers, and I submitted, along with some other people, submitted some images for consideration. So they were going to have the 6 species of penguins that are found in the British Antarctic Territory. So emperors, kings, gentoos, chinstraps, macaronis and adelies. So all of the photos there are mine, apart from the macaroni chick, but and including the larger ones. But yeah, it was fantastic to have them selected, and they had to be approved by the Queen for you know, use on the territory stamps.
So could you only buy them in the South Atlantic, or are they available elsewhere?
You can buy them elsewhere, including from me. You can buy them in the Falklands. You can buy them in South Georgia, and I believe online. But yeah,
nice. And this image, of course, I like this one. Your name on that. So this is your tent.
Yeah, that was my home. I was very, very fortunate to have a fantastic experience working for Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions a couple of years ago, and I was there to help people with their photography. So people flying in to go and see emperor penguins, just a small number of guests, 10 guests, and I was there for the duration for about 5 weeks. So this was my home for 5 weeks, my luxury tent. Not big enough to stand up in, but that's okay. So every night I'd crawl in. We were camped about 1.5 miles from the colony so as not to disturb the birds, but they wandered over to check us out, and you know, you'd hear them in the middle of the night, and every time I heard them I would have to get out and go and have a look, because you know, what a fantastic experience. I'd get into my bed at night, into my sleeping bag I should say, and my big treat was I'd stick my headphones on and listen to Michael Palin's audio diaries, and then invariably fall asleep, not as a result of his voice, but as because I was just so tired, and that was my big treat.
I bet. And let's just have a look at the front cover of your book, Emperor, the Perfect Penguin. Superbly printed book, actually, I can assure you. Well, now we'll be opening up the chat line for questions very soon. So if you do have anything to ask Sue, now is the time to click on the chat bubble at the bottom of the screen and type in your question. Just a pity question, if you don't mind. Now, a couple of great images to end on. Your favorite two men, other than your husband, of course. First of all, Michael Palin. So what's happening here?
Well, I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go with Michael and some mutual friends to the Antarctic. 8 of us on a trip for a couple of weeks, and so when it came to doing my Emperor Penguin book, I asked him if he would very kindly write the foreword for me, which he agreed to do, and even more generously he said he would interview me at the Natural History Museum for the launch. And I wanted that to be at the Natural History Museum because that's where, from Apsley Cherry Garrard's book Worst Journey in the World, that's where the Emperor Penguin eggs came back to. So it was
so he interviewed you. I like it.
I know, my God. I'll tell you what, I was nervous before that. I mean, what a lovely, lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
It was very kind of him.
And then the next image, here you are with Michael and David.
God, yes. Yeah.
Is that your favourite image of all time?
It probably is, actually. This was, as you say, apart from my fantastic husband Chris, my 2 favourite men on the planet, and this was 2 nights after my book launch. It was Michael's book launch for Erebus, and it was just fantastic because this was a little party beforehand, and in the acknowledgements of my book I write about, first of all, Michael saying thank you to him for the foreword, and then the next paragraph is talking about David and what he means to me and how he'd inspired me. And I actually had a copy of my book with me that evening, so I had what I have to say is one of the best experiences of my life. I was able to stand there, hold David's arm and read out this paragraph to him in person and just tell him what he meant to me. So I thought, I'm not a great fan of selfies, I have to say, but I just thought I have to capture this for posterity, and I'm very glad I did.
Excellent. Well, David Attenborough said just this week, if he had known that human beings could exterminate whole species, he would have spoken out about pollution and climate change years ago. So what is your take on what we're doing to the planet? Well,
for anyone who hasn't seen it, I would absolutely encourage you to see the new program Our Planet on Netflix. It's brilliantly done. It's extremely powerful, and you know, this week, having seen 2 programs where you're revisiting what the world used to be like, both in Our Planet with David and also in Travels of a Lifetime with Michael Palin, seeing how things used to be decades ago. It's extremely sobering. And, you know, as David says, you've got to trying to stop waste, trying to think about how we're living. And there are, as I say, some very powerful messages in that film, and it is extremely moving, and it's a very important documentary.
Okay, Sue, well, thank you so much for that brilliant rundown of your career, which still has a long way to go. And we'll come back to you later. But first of all, it's time for questions, so do keep them coming in. The first one, actually, some information for you. Silverback gorillas can weigh up to 35 stone. So you're pleased it didn't land on your head. Right, first question is, what is still on your photographer wish list?
Oh, what's still on my photography wish list? I never get bored of going to the Antarctic, I must say, and this is the first year in, I think, 20 years I haven't been there, so I would love to return there, but in terms of places I haven't been and things I haven't done, I would very much like to go to Bhutan, and also to photograph tigers. Of course, it's increasingly difficult to go and see places and do things, and one is very conscious of travel and weighing that up against the downside of my job is, of course, having to get on planes, and where I can, if I'm in the UK, I will travel by public transport, but going to places that I guess are relatively untouched, which is increasingly difficult, but I spent some time in Siberia recently, and that was a real eye-opener.
So next question, how important is research before you arrive at a location?
Great question. Incredibly important, incredibly important. And for the Blue Planet, myself and my colleagues, Penny Allen and Joe Ruxton, we spent almost a year researching before we ever went out filming. So combination of reading, going to scientific conferences, talking to scientists, following up different leads. So, you know, you want to make sure, as Alistair, our boss, would have said, you want to make sure the money ends up on the screen. And of course, some things you can plan for a long way in advance, and you have to, because you need to get permissions. So for some things, it may have taken a year or even longer to get that permission. And then other times, you might have something where you had to respond extremely quickly, like the polar bear and the beluga situation. So, you know, the killer whale, grey whale one, I spent months and months on the phone trying to set that up. The polar bear beluga one was, you know, you got less than 2 days to get ready and go. So yeah, always trying to research, and because some of these bits of behaviour, you might have one chance to see it, and then that's it for the next year. So you've got to be on the ball.
I suppose it's worth saying, you know, most people can't operate at the level of the Natural History Unit. However, even if you're going out just birding, you need to do your research.
No, absolutely. And I'm certainly not suggesting we all have to dash off all over the world. We don't. I mean, one of the beauties of beauty is the wrong word perhaps, but one of the opportunities that has been afforded us during lockdown is the chance to stop and take solace in nature and what's around us, which I think is even more important now than ever before. But you don't have to go abroad to find fantastic wildlife. I mean, the other night I was coming home up our drive and a badger ran across in front of me, or watching birds in your garden. And that's the thing, going back to observations about things, it doesn't matter whether it's a bird in your back garden, or your pet dog or whatever it is, but just spending time watching is going to really help your photography. And of course, if it's if they're wild animals and you're observing them, you're always going to have a better handle on what you're doing by spending time watching.
And perhaps even more important during lockdown or semi-lockdown. Right, next question. Have you ever had to save an animal in the wild?
Have you ever had to save an animal in the wild? There have been situations where I would like to have actually done the opposite, I have to say, but of course that wouldn't go terribly well. There have been situations where I've seen things that have been badly injured and I would like to have finished them off, but that wasn't something I could have done. I've had people ask me why I haven't saved certain things when it would have just been too dangerous. So for example, the polar bears and belugas, those photographs ended up in an American wildlife magazine, and someone was saying, well, why didn't I stop the bear hunting the belugas? And of course you can't do that. I mean, it's physically not possible. And why didn't I call a vet? Because you're in the middle of nowhere in the Canadian Arctic. But in terms of rescuing something, I know there was a lot of discussion when the recent film came out with the emperor penguins, where they'd helped a chick out of a hole that was going to be stuck in there. I think you'd have to be a very hard-hearted person not to do that. I actually can't think of a situation where I have done that, funnily enough. But yeah,
No, that's fine. You've given us your.
Shouldn't really interfere. As a biologist, you shouldn't interfere. But if I was faced with a penguin chick stuck in a hole, I think it would be, I'd be hard pressed not to lift it out of there.
Okay, Dylan Diver, who is aged 8, would like to know, what is your favourite book?
Hello, Dylan. What's my favourite book in terms of wildlife books? Ooh.
Other than your own, of course.
I really do love some of the Attenborough books and some of the old things like Zoo Quest, which I grew up with when I was a kid. So in terms of natural history books, yeah, some of those old David Attenborough books I absolutely devoured as a child, and also actually bird watching books, things like, you know, Colin's Guide to Birds of Britain and Europe. And it's funny, I've still got that from when I was a kid, and I used to write in there when I saw different birds, and I was looking back at that the other day. It made me laugh. So there's a snowy owl, and I've written next to the snowy owl, Chester Zoo, 1972. And I think the lovely thing is, you know, I never dreamt that I would get to see these things in the wild.
In the wild, so much better.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's a very poignant message that David delivers in this Our Planet documentary, talking about you know, the disappearance of habitat and the importance of rewilding. So
right, I just want to get through one last question, which is, what advice have you got for someone who wants to get into nature photography?
I would say be prepared. If you want to make a career of nature photography, you have to want to do that more than anything else on the planet, because it's a difficult job to get into. If it's not as a career, and it's something that's a hobby, then I would say I definitely encourage that, because it's possible to do that as a hobby that takes up a lot of time with it, and have a paying job as well, or obviously that's a paying job for me, but get a portfolio together and look at styles, look at people's styles of photography that you like, and look at competitions like Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and look at the photos and think what you like about those, and of course practice. And the great thing is about now you've got the advantage of digital photography. You know, when I started out, I was photographing on film, and it was a lot more difficult and expensive because you were going off on trips and you didn't know if these shots had come out. So, you know, the killer whale, grey whale trip and the polar bear beluga trip, I was shooting those stills on film. Whereas, of course, when you switch to digital, it's a lot easier because you can look in the back of the camera. So it's cheap to experiment, but certainly what I would say is, well, as I mentioned before, as my mum used to say to me, how come you're so patient with wildlife and not with people? So you're going to be very, very patient and spend time observing.
Right, well, Sue, thank you so much. It's all we have time for. A huge thank you to Sue Flood FRPS for showing us some of her fabulous images and also the incredible stories to go with them. It's been lovely to have you with us, and best of luck for the future.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.
Okay, well, we've got some great guests coming up for you soon, starting with Simon Roberts, Honorary FRPS. He's one of Britain's best known contemporary photographers, and Simon has spent many years examining the relationship between people and landscape and notions of identity and belonging. His current project concerns the disappearance of ancient broadleaf woodland, which is being cleared for housing schemes, golf courses and major infrastructure projects like HS2. So do join us for that. And in the meantime, I'd like to thank very much indeed the production team of Andy Moore, LRPS, and Stuart Wall, ARPS, for all their hard work. And I hope you can join us next time. Goodbye from everyone at the Royal Photographic Society.